What if everything you thought you knew about movement, recovery, and pain was missing a critical piece? What if the key to unlocking true healing wasn't in the muscles, but in the fascia, the nervous system, and the way your body truly communicates? Today, we sit down with Dr. Tim Brown, a pioneer in sports medicine and movement science, to break down some of the biggest mistakes in manual therapy. He'll reveal what elite athletes do differently and explore how skin, proprioception, taping revolutionize performance and healing. And if you're a healthcare provider, therapist, or just someone who wants to move and feel better, this episode is for you. Welcome to the Cracking Backs podcast. Let's dive in. Get ready for insights that will change the way you think about body forever. Oh boy. All right, Tim, what's going on, buddy? I'm glad to have you on. Hey, what was the problem we had last time? Was there like a phone thing or do you remember the last time we had Tim on?
Yeah.
Dr. Terry.
Yeah, he was on his phone on the way to the airport. But
yeah, now we got him crystal clear, baby. We got some great questions for you, Tim.
Oh, great.
All right, let me jump right on. Let me get started by asking you some of the things that I was so curious about. I mean, you've been doing movement and motion and recovery and performance. I mean, for as long as I remember you, which has been a long time, maybe not as long as Dr. Terry. But with that said, tell me, where did this passion, how did it start? Where did it all come from?
I think I probably share a pretty common story with many of us sports chiropractors. It came from being injured often and not being satisfied with the level of care that I received. And I thought, gosh, if I could just handle, jail/school for 4 more years, I could come out, and even if I didn't remain a doctor, I would be able to take that knowledge for myself and my family and my friends and be able to do something with it. So it just really came out of curiosity and the dissatisfaction with the status quo of sports medicine.
So like what we learned as chiropractors in school was, crack and go. But then we branch off, like people do a little more soft tissue stuff. Do you remember what the first moment you decided to take the adjustment to the next level?
Yeah, I'm down here in Southern California, and and beach volleyball in the 80s, as you know, was just massive. And so I was a player, and so I was hearing about this guy that everybody was going to, all the top players in the world. I was good friends with Dane Selznick and St. John Smith and all those kind of top guys because I was a player. So I was really curious about this guy they kept talking about, and he was a chiropractor. His name was Joe Horrigan, who we all know and respect. And Joe had been working with athletes for many years and had come up with a technique that was not adjusting. It was doing a really very, very thorough examination, both orthopedic and movement exam and neurological exams. And then he was finding the soft tissues that were creating mechanical stress on the area, whether it was a shoulder or a spine or whatever it might have been. And he was finding strategies to lengthen the soft tissues that were creating mechanical stress on the area of involvement. And so I was asking these guys, well, I've heard of chiropractors and whatnot, but this guy is not adjusting you. And they said, no, he doesn't adjust. He just does soft tissue. So that really intrigued me. And I had never been to a chiropractor before, but just innately it sounded right. It sounded good. So that's kind of who I followed. When I was in school, I just kept track of him. And then also a guy named Dr. Leroy Perry, who at the time was probably the most renowned sports chiropractor, because there were only probably a few of them at that time. And so I was able to do an internship with him and take some of his champion courses and, take out his trash and find out what he was doing with athletes. And he took a very holistic approach. We, of course, in school learn a reductionist approach to medicine or the body, where we're learning how all the parts work as individuals. And here Leroy Perry was putting all these pieces together into a holistic model that focused on structure, biochemistry, and the psychology. And so mind, body, spirit, all those things, he had this triangle that he focused on. And so that became a big part of how he worked on people, is he didn't just pick the spine to work on. He looked at, what was going on and what they ate, what they thought, and what they did on a regular basis, and recognized that that had a whole lot to do with not only how their performance and recovery went, but how his treatments could help benefit them by not just focusing on adjusting the spine or adjusting the extremity, but really looking at these other subsystems in the body that you need to connect to have your best result.
I love it. Boy, you got to work with some legends. Leroy Perry, that is a legend.
Yeah, it was unreal, and Wilt Chamberlain's walking through, and Carl Lewis and the Howard sisters and Dwight Stones and all these people that, there was no internet right back then. We're talking about almost pre-computers. And so it was mind-blowing for me to see this guy work with these people and just the adulation that they had for him, because he had so many great answers, and for them to be able to accelerate in their careers and create, how many world records, many, many. So I got to see that, and I got to see his innovation. He had a cave that he built out of mirrors inside of his office, so that if I'm walking and I've got a gait problem, and he says, hey, your foot's turning out when you're planting or on the push off, or it gave the athletes a chance to actually see that, not with videotape, but actually live walking through this cave. You could see every angle of your body. And just the innovation that he had was just, for me, super inspirational. And it told me that, hey, all the answers aren't out there yet. So that when I grow up and I get my doctorate and I'm able to get out there, perhaps I can do some innovation, because creativity's always been fun for me. It's always been kind of something where it's a great jump off point for me, even going through school, to be able to differentiate from what other people were talking about and thinking. And so it was super inspirational every day, and I couldn't wait to take out the trash and for Leroy and learn more just by kind of feeling the vibrations around his office. It was on that level.
Dr. Tim Brown, you have always been an innovator. Ever since I've known you, you have a creative side, an imagination that has spawned so many different things. And we'll get into some of those, a little bit more deeply. But I want to ask you about, you've experienced some of the, best athletes in the world, and they have this incredible ability to control and communicate with their bodies in ways that we can only be inspired by. What are they doing differently that you see? And
they're getting better. They're getting better genetics.
Okay, how about for the average person? What is the average person?
It's mindset. It's what's happening above the shoulders. I think what jumps into my mind right away is their development is very interesting too, and getting the chance to have Kobe referred to me was incredible moments for me, not just to be honored, but to look at the inside of the machinations of what goes on in a guy's life that's like that has that much talent. And I'll be frank with you, when I first met him, I wasn't super impressed with the human that he was. This was earlier on in his career. He got in a little bit of trouble, and I wasn't super stoked on how he addressed it. Not that was my business, but I certainly was an observer. Mm-hmm. And then about 3 months before he passed, I hadn't seen him for a couple years, and he invited the USA surf team to come up to Mamba, and it's like a sports university campus that he had, this big sports complex up in Westlake Village. And he invited the surf team up there to come get tested and utilize their facility, and he was going to give us a little talk. And so like I said, I hadn't seen him for a while, and when he walked in, and we bumped eyes and locked in on each other. He walked right over, looked me in the eyeballs, and I'm just going, "Hey, it's been a couple of years. You remember our time together?" He's like, just grabbed me in this big hug, and I'm like, "Who is this guy? He's really changed." And the speech that he gave to the athletes that were vying to be on the USA Surf team was incredible. And I saw a transition in a human that I'd never seen before. He went from this guy that was, kind of the king of the block and had the attitude of it, to the most humble, look you in the eyes, be totally present, giving person, one of the most gnarly transitions I've ever seen, and one of the most beautiful ones I'd ever seen. And it almost brought me to tears to see a guy that I just like it. He's just another, asshole making more money than we'll ever see. And because of that, it puts him in a place where he thinks he's above people. He lost all that. He became a human, a humble person, and one that wanted to elevate and lift all the ships in the harbor with the knowledge that he had gained. And so one other quick little drop on that too, because I think it's a really important part for sports chiros out there that are especially seeing kids with parents that really want them to be the best that ever lived at whatever they do, which is fantastic. But recognizing from Kobe the sacrifice that you have to make to be the best, there is a huge difference between wanting to be good and wanting to be great. And we know that just by me saying that there's a difference there. But what that difference is life-changing. And what Kobe illustrated was after someone asked him about, "Look, Kobe, I know you wanted to be the best in the world. You've accomplished that. I'm trying to do the same. I want to be the best at what I do, but I'm having a really hard time balancing my relationships at home with my work schedule, with my training schedule, with my competitive schedule. How do I find balance in my life to be able to accomplish these things? I would really, truly want to be the best. I'm fully dedicated to it." And he just kind of looks at her and smiles and goes, "May I be frank with you?" And she said, "Of course." He goes, "Get that effing word balance out of your mind. Because if you want to be great, if you want to be the best, there is no balance in greatness." And I just went, double mic drop. It was ridiculous to me in that sense that here's someone saying that if you want to be great, you can't be healthy. You cannot be the healthiest person. And then I look back in my mind right away, all the great people that I've met and that I've read about through history. They're strange, man. Right? Any artist or musician or athlete that's just at the top of the level, how can they relate? You can't relate to them. They haven't gone through the same steps as you have. In fact, they've ignored the social piece of life. You can't go to the parties. You're going to miss birthdays. You're going to do all these things in order to be great, because people that are good are going to those parties. And if you want to be great, you have to elevate yourself. And that's one of the things that you have to sacrifice. So for me, spending, at that point in time, probably 35 years in practice, working on some of the greatest athletes. And my effort was to get them balanced. And no wonder they could never reach balance. It's because there is no balance in greatness. So I just wanted to share that with you. And so when you're talking to parents of kids that want their kids to be the greatest ever, you got to let them know straight up. There's no balance in greatness. You're gonna take your kid off into a tangent here. They're not going to be able to relate to everybody on the block. So make sure that you know what you're getting into when you're hunting for greatness.
Tim, little did I expect that to be as inspirational a message, but a profound one. And I really appreciate it. And to quantify and qualify what you're saying, there's actually a phenomenon called Shakespeare's fatal flaws. It's Shakespeare, when he wrote about characters, there was always a character in his storyline that excelled tremendously in one area, but at the cost of another. So, if he described a very wealthy man, but he had terrible social skills, or someone who was a great lover but was poor and broke, or something. There was always something that was in deficit versus what he achieved. So you're absolutely. I mean, thank you for sharing that, because that really makes someone more human when you hear about the stories. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely, Spencer. That's it's so true. It's really that one little 2-minute section of his talk has stayed in my mind almost on the daily since then. It was so important to get that across, and also now to know when I have these athletes that are at the top of their game, why they're a little tweaked. It's because they're not whole, because they're not balanced. And so when you're not whole, the other thing that I've certainly learned over time and through experience is when you're not whole, you really can't have solid relationships. It's very difficult to love when you're not whole. In fact, that person that's not whole, that tries to love, oftentimes destroys that other person, even though they love them. And so that's another big piece of it too, is recognizing the fatal flaws that can come from trying to be great.
Yeah. I'm going to inject for something. I think sometimes as even as humans, we cheer our heroes to get to the top, but once they make the top, we try and break them down. Yeah. And I think what we're doing is we're seeing we're blind to the flaws as they climb the ladder, and then when they make it, we see the flaws that took to get to the top of the ladder, and we focus on that instead of, wow, they made it.
Yeah, it's it's absolutely true.
I never looked at it that way, so thank you for sharing that, because I went, that's I think that's why we do that. We never see flaws until they're at the top, but it takes the flaw to get them to the top. So it's a double-edged sword. So thank you for that, bud.
Yeah, and then when you're at the top, not many places to go.
Right, and not a lot of friends up there with you.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty rare air.
Yeah. Wow.
Speaking of being at the top of your game, Tim, you've been at the top of the soft tissue game, manual therapy. I want to talk about. There's a ton of different approaches out there. In chiropractic college, we learned, NIMO, NIMMO, or trigger point. And then there was Travell's stuff and trigger point myofascial. Then there was ART, and then there's GRASS and all that. Tell me, what do you think that a lot of these guys, when I say guys, I mean it generically, but, practitioners of healthcare do unknowingly that works against the nervous system? Like, can you make some suggestions of what they do that are, in your perspective, big mistakes?
Well, I think first and foremost, what we've all learned and what we all share is a knowledge about the nervous system. It kind of runs the whole boat. And some of the things that we missed in school because we were kind of in a reductionist environment is that, and certainly I didn't learn it. I had to go post-grad, dig into the books. And the only reason that I dug into the books was because I was asked to speak about what the hell I was doing. And I really didn't know. I just knew the line was growing outside the tent every week. So I must be doing something right. And that's what kind of got me into looking at Yanda's work. Yanda, of course, was the neurologist from Czechoslovakia that created upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome, among many other great contributions. But he was a neurologist that had polio as a kid. And so that brought his interest into rehabilitation. So not many neurologists focus purely on rehabilitation, but that was his focus. And so I was looking to understand why my taping system worked. I was looking at what's the physiology behind why this stuff's working. And I started to read about the Czech School of Rehabilitation and Yanda's work. And he struck me deeply with this. I'll paraphrase, but he spoke about if you don't work on the skin when you're doing soft tissue work or musculoskeletal work, you're missing a tremendous opportunity to stimulate the nervous system. And I'm like, okay. And so I looked at it, and he goes, okay, you follow this little path of stimulating nerve receptors through the skin. And there's a thing called Hilton's Law. And Hilton's Law states that every soft tissue structure under the skin grows nerves that are in the skin. And we now know that there's over 200 million nerve receptors in our skin in the body. But now what science is saying, and this is a lot through the stuccos over in Italy, science is talking about the fascia. And we thought that the skin was the largest organ in the body. Well, get ready to replace that with fascia. We now know that fascia is involved in every cell, in every system of the body. And we also understand that it's got a third more, so 300 million cutaneous, not cutaneous, but nerve receptors within that fascia. So there's a constant feed forward and feedback going on in these systems. And so for me, I'm working on site. That's been my whole career, is working on site on athletes that are about to compete or are between competitions during the same day. And so certainly what we never wanted to do was to depress the nervous system when we're working on somebody. And we learned by going deep on athletes while they're competing, you literally can make someone feel as good as they've ever felt, but at the same time disconnect subsystems. So you disconnect, say, for instance, the muscle from the nerve to the brain when you do deep work. And that's called the Arndt-Schultz principle. And what that states is that light touch stimulates physiology. Deep touch depresses physiology. So that's the reasoning we don't go deep on athletes when they compete. So I'm working on athletes that they really need musculoskeletal care. They need tissue work to get them through their days. But you can't go deep on them, right? So then you're going to go do sports medicine strokes, which are really fast and so forth, and not deep. But for me, being an athlete and having that procedure done on me, I really didn't feel it. I didn't feel like I was getting all I could get. So I took the information I was getting about taping and said, well, if this taping thing is stimulating the nervous system from the outside in like this, why don't I just try some soft tissue that's trying to do the same thing? And I win on at least one side because I don't have to go deep on the athlete. So I started working on upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome, doing very light strokes on the athletes. And it was on day one from the first athlete, a paradigm shift for me. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd studied proprioception. I'd studied the cutaneous nervous system like everybody did, but I wasn't an expert at it. And so since that time, many, many years ago, I've been, just feeding myself with information about how to stimulate the nervous system, how to stimulate, not irritate, and to what level could I get these athletes going on the same day of competition or very close to competition with soft tissue work that would still improve their ability to move better, but keep them connected to their subsystems, keep them connected to their sensory motor systems, heighten proprioception and all those other things that allow us to move as athletes and be at a really high level. So I know that's a really convoluted answer there, but that's kind of the route that I've taken. And I've only gotten, I was going to say deeper into it, but that's probably not the right terminology to use.
Lighter.
I've learned more about the physiology of how the tissues work. And a muscle knot is not a knot like we learned it in school. A muscle knot is layers of tissue that are sticking together and not sliding on one another. So what we're doing with what I'm going around and teaching now is this technique called specific proprioceptive response technique. Definitely not a marketing guy. So we call it SPRT. And that's really teaching the body how to move better by lengthening muscles that are overused and understretched and adding tone to areas that are underused and obviously undertoned. So that helps me to help athletes bring their body back towards the middle. Joint centration is the goal for everything that we do. And it's a constant because we really never get there. It's like the balanced man or the balanced person. I never met him. You know, I've never met the person that has a right side that functions like their left side. We're all out of balance. We're constantly out of balance. And I think that leads to another thing called the Fibonacci sequence, or the golden ratio, which is how we're built and how we're put together. Many of our parts are put together with this mathematical sequence. And so putting all those things into a big bag and shaking it up and then being able to deliver some of these things within your treatments offers people things that they've never been offered before. And I'm not saying it's better than anything. I recommend everybody, when they take my courses, I recommend that they stay with what they're doing and then sprinkle some of this in. And if one day you find that it overtakes what you're doing or offers your athletes or patients better results, then jump right in. We're here to support you. But for me, if I'm trying to get somebody better as quickly as possible, I drank my own Kool-Aid on this stuff. I think it works really well. And certainly a lot of the people that have taken the course or that I've been able to teach have given me a lot of encouragement that we're going down a road that hasn't been traveled before. So I'm super excited to share what we know.
Tim, let me ask you, there are people that are listening and watching this program they're lay people. And I would like to just go back for a moment, ask you two questions. Can you explain what fascia is and explain, I've never heard the term joint centration. What is that? Explain if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, fascia is we have three layers of it. And the idea when I was in school, Spencer, was that fascia, it's nothing. In fact, when we went into dissection, they took the fascia out the cadavers because we didn't need to learn it because it wasn't doing anything.
Right.
And now, of course, we know that it's probably the richest tissue in the body that can fortify change. So it doesn't. Well, there's controversy about fascia still, and I'm not an expert at it, but I'll throw in a couple of things that I know. So there are some muscle fibers within some fascia. So some people call fascia a contractile tissue, but in reality, 90% of it doesn't have contractile tissue in it. So when we're talking about working the fascia, we're really talking about two things. We're talking about allowing fascia to slide on its surfaces. That's what allows movement to happen. And we're also talking about fascia stimulating the release of what's called fasciocytes. So when we work on fascia and we work on it with shear stress, like soft tissue work, we stimulate the fascia to create what's called fasciocytes. And fasciocytes are cells that actually produce hyaluronic acid. And hyaluronic acid, if you look at anatomy and you look at layers of skin, there's a layer of hyaluronic acid in there. And hyaluronic acid holds water in the tissues. And so holding water in the tissues is critical for movement, but it's also critical for conducting electricity through the body. So it's really important. There's a great saying that I've been using a whole bunch now, and it's called, if you don't hydrate, you can't vibrate. And all our cells vibrate. And if they're not vibrating at peak frequency, because my nervous system has a different vibration than my muscular system, than my organ system, every cell or every tissue has a different vibration. But the goal is to hydrate them and to stimulate them so they're vibrating at the ideal frequency, which allows you to perform, recover, etc. So fascia is really, really important for movement. Obviously, you may have seen some of the diagrams where if you tear through the fascia scars. And when the fascia scars, the body is wrapped in fascia like a sweater, right? So they use the analogy of if you took some thick yarn to try and sew up that cut in the fascia, all the fascia in the body is going to get pulled towards that scar. And that's really what's happening when we overuse an area, when we have an area that's traumatized, et cetera. Those layers begin to stick together and we lose movement on a micro level. And then over time, that micro level turns into macro because everything's affected by movement. If my right ankle isn't moving properly because I've got a scar down there that penetrates through the layer of soft tissue and fascia, my whole body is being pinned by that area. And so we have to be aware of not only fascia now and the layers of soft tissue, but what's happening with the scarring system in the body. If you've got scars in your body and they're deep, they're affecting movement. I don't care if it's in your foot and you've got a low back, that may be connected. So we've got to look at all these systems, and fascia physiology is just fascinating stuff. And they're learning more and more about it on a daily basis. So look up Guy Forget from Canada, look up the Stucco family in Italy. Those seem to be at the highest level of studying and understanding fascia. But it's it's another thing to add to the list, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's one of the most important systems you can learn about. And it's changing every day.
So, no, I wanted him to answer joint centration.
Thanks, Spencer, for remembering that. So joint centration is basically trying to get all sides of a joint to have equal balance in its tone and its ability to move. Your joint centration is going to look way different than mine, and Terry's going to look different than both of ours, because joint centration is just doing the best you can with what you have. And if you have an athlete that can't squat well or has to really turn his or her feet out to accomplish that full deep squat, we want to look at the hip morphology. Especially if you've given them movements to help clean that up and it doesn't happen. Wow. You want to look at how that head of the femur is fitting into that acetabulum, because I bet you it's got some little curve on it or some little angle that's not allowing it to sit in there or centrate like yours and mine. Wow. So everybody's centration is different. And you can think of centration as perfect posture. Everything's lined up just nice and everything moves very smoothly with the least amount of resistance. You've got equal agonist-antagonist going on around the joint. So the centration piece is the ultimate goal. Do we ever get there? I'm not so sure that we do, but every day we bounce into positions and movements and therapies that stimulate our abilities to come as close as we can, because we know optimum performance lies very closely in bed with joint centration.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Spencer, for getting that, and thank you, Tim, for that, because actually it leads into my thought that modern medicine is they focus on individual parts, right? And you have a knee pain, I'm just going to look at your knee. Oh, you have an ankle sprain, let's put you in the boot, and we're just going to focus on just the ankle. And you would think that we've evolved more, but we haven't much. So how do you see this paradigm shift and taking place where people look at the ball where it's no longer holistic, which is considered, you guys are holistic doctors? Well, everybody should be a holistic doctor.
Yeah.
So how do we get this paradigm shift to get these practitioners to start looking at our body as a whole? How do you see that vision happening?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That comes down to how medicine is set up in our society.
Yeah.
My orthopedic pals, they want to average a patient every 90 seconds when they're doing office hours. And you and I both know that's not happening. If you want to call yourself a doctor and you want to see somebody for 90 seconds, how are you going to learn about how they're sleeping, how their life's going, what's their biopsychosocial status? All those things that are critical to optimizing healing are blown off. And I can't just say it's the medical deal. There's a lot of chiros out there that want to see somebody every few minutes. And how do you instruct someone how to stay away from you if you're just giving them a handshake and a routine to be adjusted? Muscles move bone, fascia moves bone, our whole system moves bone. So if you're not addressing those other subsystems, you're only addressing the end game. Are you really a holistic doctor? Are you really a natural doctor? Mm-hmm. I don't think that can happen. You really have to look at those systems. So I look at it this way too, Terry. You're a doctor that produces income, or you're a doctor that produces outcomes. And I think you have to make a choice, because I'm not smart enough in business to do both. And so I've chosen, the smiles that I get at the end of a session.
Love that.
And I'm not trying to be, hey, look at this guy, he's all up above everybody else. That's not it at all. I was that athlete on that table. And that outcome to me was the most important thing in my life. And so I look at every patient that gets on my table as me. I want to give them something that they'll remember the rest of their life, and that's very special, and that they can set a bar to, so that when they go to somebody that's not answering their questions, or not taking the time to understand what they do in their life that brought them to this point, I want to be different, and I want to teach that.
Oh, well, man, that's great. Well, you are different. So I'll just set that right off the bat. You're one of my favorite mentors.
Oh, thank you, Terry.
Friends that just, you're always thinking outside the box. And that's why we want this conversation to get people to think out. And we even had a guy, Tom Mayer, goes, don't think about outside the box. It's a terrible term, because what does the box mean, right? But thank you for that thought. And, before we go into what I'm going to have Spencer talk about a little bit, let's talk a little bit how you came about this technique. And was it happen chance, or was it just studying and practice, or not holding yourself to any constraints? You just kind of went where your heart did. How did you come up with this SPRT?
Yeah. So when I got out of school, I was still trying to compete as a beach volleyball player at a pretty high level. So I qualified for a lot of Association of Volleyball Professionals, the beach volleyball tour events. And hit me with that question again.
How did you come up with SPRT?
Yeah.
Is it from a heart thing, or an intellectual thing, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I lost my...
That's okay.
Post-concussion syndrome. So one of the things that I got in school when I was playing sports was a very limited sports medicine team. This is back in the 70s and 80s. And so you got a medical doctor and an athletic trainer usually, and they kind of ruled the roost. And you're going to get pills, ultrasound, hot pack, an injection, or surgery. So there wasn't a whole lot of options there, and taping. And so when I got out of school and was asked to, become medical director for this Pro Beach volleyball tour, they had just been given like $30 million from Miller Lite to form this tour. And so it was one of those things where I don't think I was even in the room when they asked about who wanted to be the medical director. I just know everybody took one step backwards, and I was sitting there by myself out there with this opportunity to run the sports medicine for these guys. And so the first thing that I did was I said that, the philosophy behind this is going to be, we want to bring everybody out there that can bring something to the table, the sports medicine table, other than a fork. We want people that can contribute. So from medical doctors to nutritionists to performance specialists, athletic trainers, physical therapists, sports chiropractors, I don't care what was behind your name. If you had something to contribute to the athletes, we had a place for you there. And so we formed this kind of this incredible nationwide group of multidisciplinary practitioners. And I say multidisciplinary because that's what it was at the beginning. But my goal was to not make it multidisciplinary as much as it was to make it interdisciplinary. I wanted these doctors and therapists to talk to each other and communicate with the athletes and educate each other. And so that's kind of how we formed this compendium of diverse knowledge coming at these athletes with an open mind that if you had something to contribute, man, we want you there and we want you talking about it. And, in fact, if you've got something new, you can try it on me first, then let's talk about it. We'll have a couple other people in on it too. And it just became a great mashup of different backgrounds, different educations, different sports backgrounds that would all come together to help these athletes. And so frankly, Terry, I learned or created this stuff based upon what everybody's feedback was as we moved forward. It was a fluid situation. We tried new stuff on the regular. As long as it had a basis in science and made good physiological sense, we would give it a go. And so for the taping thing, that came about when a guy blew his AC joint out. He separated his shoulder during the semifinals of a live television broadcast, and the finals was going to be on Mother's Day on NBC. And an athlete named Tim Hovland blew his shoulder out. And so we had, the orthopedist, everybody over there looking at it, and we had an athletic trainer that was a really good taper. And so we had them tape up that shoulder like you would conventionally as an athletic trainer. And for me, when I saw this taping system going on, I'm going, I'm not sure that's going to really help this poor guy out, because it was with an ACE bandage, and they're trying to reduce this, grade 2, grade 3 AC separation, which for those that aren't docs out there means that the shoulder has torn ligaments and you would see a big bump on the shoulder. That would be the deformity that would come when that joint was disrupted like that. So our goal is to reduce that bump or that injury so that it can lay in better adjunct to the rest of the bones in the joint. So what we're doing is this tape job, and then Tim had the tape job done and it just wasn't working. He couldn't elevate his arm. And so he had seen me playing around with tape in the tent enough times to say, hey, Tim, why don't you come over here and try that new stuff you've been playing with? And again, this was before the internet. So I had been fascinated by some of the taping that I had seen from a guy from Australia that came and worked with us and so forth. And they were using these different tapes. So I wrote these different countries, trainers in different countries, to send me their tape that they had the best results with. Wow. So I had this tape called Leukotape. This trainer sent me from Germany. And that's a very rigid, some of you have seen it in taping. It's a very rigid brown tape that has really extraordinary adhesive qualities. So I made if you remember what an inchworm looks like, if you push tape together and then you could build a tab off of that tape, that's what I did. And I built a tab right in front of his AC joint. And then I took another piece of tape and I lengthened that tab over the top of it. And then I took the shoulder with some assistance and put it in neutral, reducing the AC separation, and then laid the tape over the top of it. And lo and behold, that reduction stayed. And so we put some surgical tape over the top, that white, sort of stretchy tape that we used, usually underneath the brown tape. I put it over the top of that tape. And lo and behold, he was able to pick up his arm and get range of motion back. And I put Happy Mother's Day on the tape job, so he would have something for his mom on Mother's Day. And went out there and he won the tournament. And it was kind of just one of those Cinderella stories, so to speak. And that was the beginning of SPRT. And then I said, well, if we can do it on the shoulder, why don't we try it on the MCLs on the knee or with patella tendonitis, et cetera. And so it just spread throughout the body, and it became a really kind of a popular thing on tour to get taped because it was very minimalistic. You didn't have to get mummy wrapped like we all grew up getting.
Yeah.
And then over time, the goal for working on athlete soft tissue was so important and such a big part of it, but we didn't, like I said before, we didn't want to go deep on athletes. I had a kind of a vision at night one time. I woke up going, oh my gosh, we could do the SPRT taping, same process, but we'll do it on the skin with soft tissue. And so I started to experiment with shortening the range of motion while I was doing soft tissue, just on the skin, not on the deep muscle, and instant results. And so started to get into studying that stuff more and studying the nervous system even more and neurophysiology of the skin. And that's how kind of SPRT got born. And it's just been a process from them going from passive range of motion to start the athlete to going to passive lengthening. And then from there going to active shortening and then active lengthening. and then finally getting them into a closed change, whatever sport they're in, athletic position, and doing soft tissue work while they're in the positions or the movements that they're doing in their actual sport. So that's kind of the genesis of the SPRT thing.
Wow. You tell a fantastic story. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He does, doesn't he? I want to elaborate that because the theme just keeps coming up about skin becoming a major performance and recovery. But you said something to me, and I didn't respond to you because I wanted to percolate on it for a while. But you texted me the other day, and you talked about, and you just briefly mentioned about sleep. And people don't think about their skin and movement patterns when they sleep and how important that is for athletes. So I didn't want to respond to you on text because I wanted to hear it just live. Talk to me about that concept.
Well, I think I may have worded it wrong. The point that I was making was that we try and we do our best to build what we call a 24/7 bubble of health for every one of our athletes that we see. And what that encompasses is the same stuff I was talking about earlier. What are they eating? What are they thinking? And what are they doing? And so within this bubble that we build are all things fantastic. All the best self-soothing tools, all the best foods, hydration, etc. And I was talking about sleep being in there because obviously sleep is just so critical to our ability to recover and clean our brain and all those things that happen when we get that nice sleep. So sleep is a part of that 24/7. You can always be doing something to improve your status as an athlete. And so we don't require our athletes to live inside that 24/7 health bubble, but we require them to understand what goes into that bubble. And we require them to understand when they open the door to walk outside that bubble. We want them to understand, what is that session going to cost me to walk outside this bubble? We want them to be conscious of it so that they take responsibility for their whole health, not just their athletic health, but everything that's going on, because, the biopsychosocial piece of it's just huge as well. It's like I mentioned at the beginning, athletics, at some point becomes, above the shoulders.
Yeah.
And so it's built to allow these athletes to focus on all the things that they need to focus in order for them to gain the confidence that they need to know that when it comes down to fourth quarter and last minute, that they've done that extra work. They have the confidence because they've been sleeping right, they've been hydrated, they've been working hard, they've been doing their prehab and rehab and so forth. We want them to have that confidence that comes with them working within that bubble. So it's kind of an educational thing, but it's also a thing that makes them work with you. You work together. You don't work on athletes, you work with athletes. And the only way to do that is to communicate. And so if they want to accept this challenge, we will create that challenge for them. But we want them to know what goes into it before they accept that challenge, because it is a commitment.
I just love the practitioner and the mindset that you've achieved over the years. I'm going to shift. You're welcome, Tim. I'm going to shift from the healthcare perspective of treating somebody, but into more of the product innovator that you have become quite a few times over the years. You've worked with some really unique materials that I've never even heard of, like shungite infused fabrics. So I'm going to ask you to explain that in just a moment, but in brief, because really the purpose of my curiosity is that, aside from the taping methods, like what, and you mentioned earlier that you're not a marketing guy. We know that, but you have a tool that can help people. And what is it that allows you to bring that innovative approach, and how do you bring that innovative approach and idea to market?
Are you speaking about a specific product or just in general?
In general, but I'm still curious about the shungite infused fabric. I want to hear about that, and I want to hear about how you bring ideas to market, whether it be that IntelliSkin or, even the SPRT, how do you revolutionize that and bring it to the masses?
Okay, well, the shungite part is really interesting in that it's we have some really cool stuff in nature that is really untapped, and so shungite is a stone that they believe was actually potentially from a meteorite that crashed into Russia many, many moons ago. And so it has really unique properties. And there are other minerals and mineraloids out there that also share these properties. The crystals that you hear about, tourmaline and amethyst and so forth, have some really cool properties that we've really not even tapped yet. All those things are compressed energy, different types of energy. And as we know, energy never goes away. It just changes form.
Yeah.
So shungite is one of those things, and they found they used to use it in ancient times as a water filter because it filtered out poisons. Okay. And now they're using it as what they say you read online about them blocking EMF fields. And I want to tell people right off the top, there is some evidence of that, but the shungite that they're selling in these cubes, or they're selling it in fabrics, that's not going to block all the EMFs. It's going to block that little area, but it's not going to block them. So I think the science is a bit off in that. But what's cool about shungite is shungite can take the body's own energy, the aura, the light molecules that come out of the body, or the heat that is expelled from the body. It takes that energy, and energy never goes away. It just changes form. So it changes the form of that energy by reflecting it back into the body in a form of an infrared wave. And they say that it can penetrate up to about 1.5 inches into the body to create microcirculation. And certainly microcirculation is what we need when we have an injury because we've got inflammation in that area. And so to enhance the body's microphysiology in that area while we have inflammation. I mean, I believe inflammation is a normal part of healing. You got to have it. But when it stays around too long, it can create some problems. So having the ability to put this shungite on is incredible. And there's other germanium, charcoal bamboo. There are other mineraloids out there that do similar things, but shungite was, brought to my attention, so I dove into that. And they're making blankets out of it now. And what was cool about it, one of the studies that they did on the blanket, and it's just clinical studies, nothing that has been published to my knowledge yet at this level, but they took someone that had very high C-reactive proteins in the body. And they measured them before they went to sleep. And then they gave them this shungite blanket and they slept. And then they did another blood test in the morning. And the C-reactive protein just went boom on this thing. So they believe there's a really brilliant anti-inflammatory effect on this. And if you look at other products like in Crediwear, they also sell these sleeves, anti-inflammatory sleeves. I mean, all my athletes are wearing these things when they have an injury or if they have a chronic problem. And you can go to bed with these things on and wake up and feel better. And I tried these things out when they first came out, and I didn't have any real big problems at the time. So I'm like, yeah, it sounds good on paper. The science sounds wonderful, but it's like almost like some of the lasers that we've seen sound great. You know, the physiology's there, the science is there, but do they work on everybody? Not in my experience. But what these sleeves do is you put them on and you walk around in them. And I'm going to tell you, I was at an 8 after straining my calf. I put it on, and in about 20 minutes, I went down to a 2. And I went, holy smokes, all this stuff. I mean, and like I said before, I tried them before when I didn't have an injury, really didn't feel a difference. But when I had this injury, wow, what a difference it made. So I'm a big fan of those kinds of things. And that fits into that 24/7 bubble I was talking about. These are all the things that we want our athletes to have, all these tools that they can use to help them to recover. And the goal is to help stay away from us. And I know that it's counterintuitive to say that, but when you have a doctor that doesn't want to see you, the word gets out, man. people want to go to that doctor because that doctor's got some tools to give you so that you can help yourself, right? And do they ever come back after that? Of course they do. Nobody rides a straight line in life. They're going to get injured again, but that experience that they had with you is really meaningful to them. And they know when they come back to you, you're not going to try and, keep them under your wing for months upon months when they really don't need to. So that's kind of a piece of that. And as far as the innovation goes, I'm just not satisfied with the status quo, hardly ever. I wasn't as a kid. I wasn't as a surfer or an athlete or as a quarterback or as a student. I'm always looking for a different way. And sometimes it's an easier way and sometimes it's a more difficult way, but I'm always looking for something different, a different perspective, because I think possibilities are endless for everything. And so that was the attitude I went with. And then, Spencer, what better environment do you have to try stuff out on when you get the, athletes at the level that we've been able to work on, having confidence in you and saying, well, what do you think? Well, I've tried this, I've tried that, but I know you've got something different up your sleeve. Let's try it. And since they know that your goal is not to hurt them or not to just, put yourself above everybody else on the planet with your innovations, I'm just there to help the athletes. They get that spirit. They feel your soul and they have an innate sense that this person's looking out for them. So they've let me literally experiment on them with these products. Of course, after I experiment on myself and a couple close friends, once I bring them out to them, they know that, hey, there's a chance that this thing could really help my body help itself. So I just come out with that kind of attitude. And then Spencer, every so often, someone will see it from the sidelines and want to have a talk with me. And maybe they have a business and they would like to see my product within their business. But I'll tell you right now, anybody that's an entrepreneur out there, has the ability to create a product. If you run a business, you have the ability to create a product because, there's a lot of similarities in running a business and creating a product. The issue is, are you well versed in that area? Do you have people around you that are smarter than you in that arena? Because unfortunately, I grew up my dad was a really tough Marine. He taught me the handshake deal. And man, when you do a handshake deal, it's like you're married to that handshake deal. And unfortunately, I took that out into the business world and have had my ass handed to me many times because unfortunately, that makes you a mark. Trusting people, unfortunately, makes you a mark in the business world. And also doing business with people that have millions and hundreds of millions of dollars is difficult too, because I've had contracts that are relatively bulletproof, but if someone's got more money than you, it really doesn't matter. You can take that contract to court and you can be granted the win, and then they appeal you, and then you got to go back and spend all that money over again and over again until you're out of money. So it's a really difficult thing. I really go into it with a spirit of, hey, I'm helping a lot of people. I'm super stoked on that. If I make some money off it, unreal. But now that I'm getting into my latter years, I recognize some of the mistakes that I've made. And so with regards to doing deals with people that I think are honest and trustworthy. So when you do deals, make sure that you've got a good attorney around you, you've got a good business advisor around you, and you understand the deal. You take the time to read that contract. And it's words that'll put you to sleep in 5 minutes, but just keep getting up and reading that contract and understand it, because it's going to make a tremendous difference to you as time goes on. So keep your left up.
Words of wisdom. I appreciate that. Thanks. I didn't expect to really reveal some of that good, juicy stuff, but thanks.
Oh, absolutely.
With
absolutely.
Said,
I mean, it's so important. If I can share some of these experiences and help someone skip a couple rungs on the ladder of learning and the ladder of wisdom, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
So we're going to wind it up and bring you to our most fun part of the program, the rapid fire questions. I got 5 questions for you, Tim.
Oh yeah.
Now we got to, they're very impromptu. We got to keep them somewhat limited in answer, but we always get hung up on the answers. But if you're ready, I got question number 1 for you. You ready? All right, my man. what's the most memorable surf session of your life? And was it a perfect wave or an epic wipeout? What did it
I
teach
can't
you?
believe the chicken skin that just came up on me there from you asking that question, man. I've been surfing since I was 4. I'm working on coming up to age 70 pretty soon. So it's been a pretty big part of my life. But I think probably the most memorable one was in Hawaii. There's a pecking order, and they have a group called the Hui over there. And a Hui is like, Crips and Bloods in LA. It's gnarly. They run the show over there. And so you always want to be on their good side. And you never want to do anything that's unsurly to a local, whether they're, 5 years old or 100 years old. They're protected, trust me. And so because I've been going over to Hawaii and taking care of the athletes on the pro surfing tour since about 1984, I've made a lot of connections. And whenever I go over there, I always try and leave the campground better than I found it by contributing to people that need care. And so I've done that for many years. And so I was working at a pipeline contest, and pipeline was off for the day. The swell was not particularly perfect for pipeline, but the waves were still good. And so a couple of the leaders of the Hui had appreciated my work. And they said, they asked me if I wanted to go for a surf. And I said, well, there's 100 guys out there right now. And, I'm like 60 years old now, and it's 8 feet and it's heavy out there. And 8 feet, you can really get hurt and or worse. And so they said, well, come, we're going to paddle you out. And what that means is they're going to have 2 big Hawaiian guys go out with you surfing. And one of the guys is going to go what we call really deep, meaning back on far on the wave, so far on the wave that he's the furthest out. And therefore he has first rights to the wave that comes in. And so he goes, okay, I'm going to yell, hey. And when you hear me yell, hey, that's your signal to go, because at the last second, I'm going to pull out, but you got to go. And so we paddle out. There's 2 guys. One guy's on the corner of the wave on the inside to yell at guys that might take off on me. And then the other guy's on the other end going, hey, making sure nobody goes behind me. And the rule is, like he said, you got to go. So these are waves that I normally wouldn't take off on, but I trust these guys. They are watermen for life. And so I got to go out with these guys, and I caught about 8 or 9 bombs out there with these guys protecting me. And if I was to go out and surf pipeline on my own, I'd be lucky to get a wave. You'd be lucky to go out. Anybody that's not a local is really lucky to get a wave out there, let alone 9. And I remember catching my last wave and riding it into the beach and looking back out at the ocean, and I'm getting it again and just breaking down and crying, because it was one of the greatest experiences of my life and a pinnacle of my life in surfing. After surfing thousands and thousands of sessions, that was the one that stood out the most.
That's awesome.
And I got to tell you, for the audience, man, thank you for sharing. But it's because of what you gave to people that you received back.
Yeah.
That is.
It's never guaranteed, but boy, what a sweet treat to be able to be gifted.
Wow.
Thanks, Tim.
Wow,
Thanks.
great.
I don't even know if I want to go on to question number 2, but I'm going. Question number 2. Tim, if you could teleport to any place in the world for just a week, someplace that you've never been, where would you go and what would you do first?
For a week?
That'd be a stupid question. Yeah.
But you've never been.
Yeah.
Never been.
So I dig ancient stuff. I dig the history that we were never told. And so I love a relatively new area of science called astroarchaeology. And it's the study of archaeological sites that were set up based upon the galaxy, and how it's places that where when summer solstice comes, the sun shines through this particular hole and lights up this piece of art, or gives you a clue to an ancient secret or whatever it might be. So that's always been intriguing to me. So it'd probably be somewhere, way back in the Middle East or in Asia, where or even in Africa, where life was kind of known to be set up. That's always been intriguing to me. The secrets of the ancients, because I believe that the history that we've been taught is absolutely wrong. And I believe that, a lot of the things that they found in archaeology we're not privy to, because it would upset how science has been told, or how history has been told, or how religion has been affected by that. And so that's, I will use a quote from one of our good friends, who has just brought us so many laughs and so many thrills and just like so many head shakes. Our boy Doug Anderson, Dr. Doug Anderson. And he says this, he says that I really don't care what the truth is. I just want to know it. And that's kind of me. I just really, I'm fascinated by the truth, especially the truths that have been hidden.
Beautiful. All right, Tim, we got 3 more questions, but we're going to wrap it up, man. Here we go. Question number 3 is, you've worked with some of the best athletes in the world. That's a beautiful thing. What's the single weirdest or most unconventional tip you've given someone that actually worked?
Well, let's see here. Yeah, I
quite a few, probably.
Yeah, probably quite a few. Okay. So I had read once about stimulating a woman's ability to deliver a baby when they're having a problem by deeply rubbing on the little toe. And so I had a patient that was having problems. She had it's kind of a personal deal in that the guy that she was having the baby with took off. Like, so they kind of broke up right when she was going to have the baby. And I get a phone call and I get asked to go over and would I be the person that helps deliver this baby? Not helps deliver, but be there in the room. And I had known this patient for many years and just was a great person. And I'd seen how luck had not shined on her multiple times. And then at the end, this guy just steps out of the room and says, I'm not going to be here. So she said, would you accompany me? And I said, yes. And so she was having problems with delivery and it wouldn't come. And so after about 8 hours, I said, well, she's like, is there anything you can do? And I just said, look, I read about this. I'm not so sure about it, but it was from this midwife and from Japan. And she said that if I rub this little toe on you, that'll help stimulate the process and your delivery would come. And holy smokes, after about 8 minutes or so of rubbing this gal's little toe, the contractions started to come. They started to come closer and closer and closer. So
No way.
That's probably the strangest thing that I've ever been involved with, and just being there for the whole thing and it was strange enough, but to be able to help stimulate that. And you should have seen the look on the nurses' faces because they're just going, you're so full of it. And I'm going, I probably am, but she's not in a great situation right now. And this is doing no harm. So I'm going to jump in. And lo and behold, that was my strangest story to date.
That works.
So anybody out there that's having problems with labor and delivery, the little toe, rub it.
Little toe.
That's outrageous. I love it. Question number 4. If you could give your 20-year-old self one piece of wisdom that you had to live by, what would that be, Tim?
Oh, study business.
Right. Yeah.
Study business. Understand the machinations of business.
Yeah.
And understand the responsibilities you're accepting as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
For there are many. and many lie underneath the bridge. And if you don't face those things, they will face you. And it's better to be on the front end than the back end. Yeah. So whenever I speak at schools, that's one of the things that I mention is this: we need to take some business courses. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just a mark out there, as I mentioned before, as an entrepreneur and developing products. It's the same in your practice. You'll just get taken advantage of left and right. And so I think understanding the rules of being an entrepreneur and the many hats that you have to wear and spin on a regular basis is very, very important. And if you don't want to take on that responsibility, make sure that you're working with someone that does. Yeah. You need those mentors. So grab a mentor that's done well in business. Grab a mentor that does very, very well in how they practice. And then grab a mentor whose philosophy you believe in. I've never met that one person that has all those things. I'm constantly looking for them. So you might need a few mentors, but those are really important things. And again, I'm here to help you save some steps on your journey in life, or at least improve the quality of your steps.
With this podcast, you will be reaching more and more people. I got question number 5, and then we got to wrap it up. But real quick, what's a simple movement or breath, or maybe even a habit that our listeners or viewers could or should start doing absolutely now to get them feeling better?
Yeah, move little bits often would be one of them, for sure. So all throughout the day, even if it's for 1 minute at a time, move your body. It's critical. And then also learn to nose breathe. Understand the power of breath. I have 5 things that I have in my pillars of fitness. It's posture, and then second is diaphragmatic breath. If you don't know how to breathe, and especially how to breathe when you're moving, you're in tremendous peril. Yeah. So understanding nose breathing, getting into it, it's a jewel. It's one of the most underused supplements on earth, along with hydration and quality of sleep.
Perfect. Of course. Tim, this has been an extraordinary show full of great advice from the heart, and I really appreciate you. Tim, actually, I got to tell you, I've known you for a long time. This is a different level of knowing you, and I really appreciate that. Thanks, Tim.
And just to let you know, Tim, we're gonna put for those listening that want to know more about your courses and how to learn more about SPRT, we're going to put that all in the description. So anybody listening to this that wants to take your courses, wants to follow you, wants to learn more about it, just go to the description. There'll be links there. They'll take you there. And obviously you're part of our family, and we've known you for 20, 30 years. We want to see your success because you deserve it. So
thank you. And we're gonna we're doing our best to keep the classes small because I want to work with individuals. I want to be able to look you in the eyeballs, and I want to make sure that you understand these techniques because they're so precious and they can be so valuable. But if we don't learn them properly, then we're out there and we're kind of going into our own little offshoots there. But I really appreciate the time. It's just been such a pleasure to know you guys throughout the years, to watch you grow and to see you guys bring so many smiles to the profession, and appreciate you highlighting those that are in the profession that we don't often get a chance to see or hear, and being able to peel back some of the layers to see how people work and how their process works is so valuable to everybody. So thank you so much, Spencer and Terry. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome. Love you, brother. Have a good day.
Big love, man.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Cracking Backs podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Cracking Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.